Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Our subject today, first step to Armageddon, December 23, 2016. This is one of those times when you can put your finger on the calendar and say a prophecy was fulfilled this day. The Bible prophesies that the international community will invade Israel because of its annexation of Jerusalem as its capital. The resulting battle will be the famous future battle called Armageddon. The United Nations took the first fateful step toward Armageddon on December 23rd, 2016. To grasp this, we need to understand the history. Jerusalem became Israel's capital around 1000 BC, when King David conquered the city of Jebus, the home of the Jebusites. He moved Israel's capital from Hebron to Jebus, changing the name of the city to Jerusalem. Jerusalem served as Israel's capital for the next 1070 years. King David, the famous king of Israel, said this concerning Jerusalem: "If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy." Now let's talk about Israel's first temple. Solomon, King David's son, built Israel's first temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. When it was finished in 968 BC, God said to Solomon, this is recorded in 1 Kings 9:3, "I have hallowed this house which thou hast built, to put my name there forever, and mine eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually." Now, when Solomon finished the temple, at the dedication of the temple, fire supernaturally fell from heaven. We read about this in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 1 through 3. Now, when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. And the priest could not enter into the house of the Lord, because the glory of the Lord had filled the Lord's house. And when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Lord upon the house, they bowed themselves with their faces to the ground upon the pavement and worshiped and praised the Lord, saying, "For he is good, for his mercy endureth forever." It's so interesting that God specifically said he would put his name in Jerusalem forever. It's recorded in 1 Kings 11:36. "And unto his son will I give one tribe, that David my servant may have a light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen me to put my name there." Now, because God announced that he would place his name in Jerusalem, Satan heard it. And when he heard it, he said, "Well, if that's where you want your name, then that's exactly where I want my name." That's when the battle all began. And the struggle for control over Jerusalem began. There have been more wars fought over the city of Jerusalem than over any other city on earth. The struggle over Jerusalem is more than a political conflict. It's a spiritual battle between God and Satan, between good and evil, between light and darkness. Now we're skipping way ahead now because Jesus prophesied the destruction of Jerusalem. The prophecy is found in Luke 19, verse 41 through 44. And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace. But now they are hid from your eyes, for the days shall come upon thee, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round about, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children with thee. And they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. Jesus said this would happen. Jerusalem destroyed, the temple leveled, because the Jews had rejected the coming of their Messiah. Well, it came to pass, not many years later, Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, fulfilling the prophecy of Jesus. That began the time that we call the Jewish exile. The Jews were forbidden from being in Jerusalem and then driven into exile by the Roman Emperor Hadrian in 135 AD. But they never forgot Jerusalem. For the next 1,900 years, religious Jews prayed 3 times each day, facing Jerusalem, asking God to return them to Jerusalem and to allow them the rebuilding of their temple there. Well, we all know that Israel was guided out of Egypt way back 1,500 years before Christ. That was called the first Exodus. But the second Exodus, it tells us that after 6 million Jews perished in World War II and Hitler's horrible Holocaust, the Jewish people from around the world were seized with a compulsion to go home to their promised land. Jewish people were pleading with world leaders to establish a homeland for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Finally, after it was realized that 6 million had died during World War II under the hands of Adolf Hitler, on November the 29th of 1947, the UN voted to create a Jewish homeland. The UN General Assembly voted to partition the territory called Palestine into a state for the Jews and a state for the Arabs. This decision was made by UN Resolution 181. When that action was taken by the world community, the Jews accepted the partition, but the Arabs rejected it. The Jews were so happy to have a homeland after 2,000 years of exile that they accepted the partition plan, even though their part did not nearly include all of the territory of the biblical promised land. The Arabs rejected the partition plan, choosing to wage war against the fledgling Jewish state in an attempt to eradicate it before it could breathe its first breath. Well, the UN, when they were dividing the land called Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state, they had to do something with Jerusalem. The dispute over Jerusalem was so hot that the UN decided to have a special plan for Jerusalem. The resolution 181 part 3D on the status of the city of Jerusalem tells us what was going to happen. the statute elaborated by the trusteeship council on the aforementioned principles shall come into force not later than October the 1st of 1948. It shall remain in force in the first instance for a period of 10 years, unless the trusteeship council finds it necessary to undertake a re-examination of these provisions at an earlier date. After the expiration of this 10-year period, the whole scheme shall be subject to re-examination by the trusteeship council in the light of the experience acquired with its functioning. The residents of the city shall be then free to express by means of a referendum their wishes as to possible modifications of the regime of the city. I want to pause right there to tell you that's never happened. Even though the UN said after 10 years the inhabitants of Jerusalem can vote, yet now here we are 50 years, they still not had a chance to vote as to the status of Jerusalem. Well, after the United Nations partitioned the land into an Arab state and the Jewish state, the Jews accepted it. The Arabs didn't want a state. They said, we want to just annihilate the Jews. Finally, on May the 14th of 1948, Israel declared independence. The British Mandate had ruled the Palestinian territories since it was conquered from the Turks during World War I. The British ended their mandate on May 14th of 1948. This forced Israel to declare independence that same day. 5 Arab nations attacked Israel the very next day, May the 15th. Let's talk about the War of Independence. Israel's population at this time was 600,000. Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Iraq launched attacks against the newborn state on May the 15th. Miraculously, Israel retained the territory of the UN partition plan, even gaining an additional 5,000 square kilometers. After about a year of war, there was a ceasefire agreement. The ceasefire agreement with Jordan happened on April the 3rd of 1949. The ceasefire line should not be considered the permanent border, according to what the armistice contract said. It said, no provision of this agreement shall in any way prejudice the rights, claims, and positions of either party hereto to the ultimate peaceful settlement of the Palestine question, the provisions of this agreement being dictated exclusively by military considerations. Jordanian forces remained in most positions held by them, particularly East Jerusalem, which included the Old City. Jordan continued to occupy East Jerusalem and the West Bank from 1949 to 1967. 1967 came, and the 6 Days War was launched in another attempt to wipe the Jewish state off the map. It began June the 5th and continued till June the 10th of 1967. On May the 16th, 1967, Egyptian President Nasser shocked the world by asking the United Nations to withdraw its forces from the Sinai. To the surprise of many, his request was honored 2 days later. Moreover, the Egyptian president closed the Straits of Tiran on May the 22nd, an act of international war. Sensing that war was now likely, King Hussein aligned Jordan firmly with Egypt, suggesting an Egyptian-Jordanian mutual defense treaty. Nasser immediately accepted the idea, and the treaty was signed on May the 30th. When the war began, Jordan attacked Israel. Israel counterattacked, driving Jordan out of East Jerusalem and the area of Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. In 6 short days, Israel captured the Sinai in the south, the Golan Heights in the north, and the entire West Bank all the way to the Jordan River. Israel had virtually occupied the entirety of the British Mandate that had originally been promised to Israel by the Balfour Declaration in 1917. Let me pause just a moment to tell you about our new exciting Armageddon collection. What does the term Armageddon mean? Why is it so important in Bible prophecy and the last days? And what will happen between now and then? In our new Armageddon collection, we cover subjects such as events of the final 7 years, the revealing of the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, and the world's greatest revival just ahead. In this special collection, you will receive the DVD, Seeds to Armageddon, November 29, 2012, our 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon, along with a printout of our 7-year timeline, our brand new DVD, First Step to Armageddon, December 23rd, 2016, plus a free DVD of today's broadcast. All of this for your gift of $140 or more, plus the cost of shipping and handling. To order your Armageddon collection, go to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. If I were you, I'd do it right now. Let's get back to our subject. UN Resolution 242 was adopted on November the 22nd of 1967. This Resolution 242 called for a just and lasting peace, which should include the application of both the following principles. 1, withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from, notice this closely, territories occupied in the recent conflict. 2, termination of all claims or states of belligerency and respect for and acknowledgement of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of every state in the area and their right to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries. Notice that phrase. Free from threats or acts of force. Israel contends that territories did not mean all territories, since the second principle specifically states that each state should live within secure and recognized boundaries. Israelis contend that boundaries leaving them 9 miles wide at the waist could not possibly be considered secure borders. So there was quite a debate over territories or the territories. Lord Caradon, chief author of Resolution 242, contends that territories instead of the territories was purposely used to acknowledge that pre-1967 borders were not secure, and therefore new borders would have to be negotiated. Caradon said, I know the 1967 border very well. It is not a satisfactory border. It is where troops had to stop in 1948, just where they happened to be that night. That is not a permanent boundary. Now, the big question, does UN Resolution 242 call for a return to the 1967 borders? Arthur J. Goldberg, another of the resolution's drafters, concurred that Resolution 242 does not dictate the extent of the withdrawal, and added that this matter should be negotiated between the parties. Does Resolution 242, as unanimously adopted by the UN Security Council, require the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from all of the territories occupied Israel during the 1967 war? The answer is no. I'm still using the words of Goldberg. In the resolution, the words the and all were omitted. In the original form of the resolution, the or all was there, but it was taken out knowing that the borders would have to be negotiated. Resolution 242 calls for the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the 1967 conflict without specifying the extent of the withdrawal. If the resolution is ambiguous, and purposely so, on this crucial issue, how is the withdrawal issue to be settled? By direct negotiations between the concerned parties. All the words of Arthur Goldberg, one of the authors of Resolution 242. Let's talk about peace efforts during the last 50 years since the 1967 war, because everybody's stuck in place where they are right now? Well, first of all, in 1979, there was a treaty concluded between Egypt and Israel. So they now have a peace treaty together. Then in 1994, Israel and Jordan signed a peace agreement. Negotiations with the Palestinians have been ongoing for so many years. It looked like they had gotten to an agreement in 1993 with their signing of the Oslo Peace Accords, but it's never worked out. In 1998, Benjamin Netanyahu negotiated the Wye River Memorandum. Again, never implemented, hasn't worked out. Finally, in the year 2000, President Bill Clinton met with Yasser Arafat and Prime Minister of Israel at the time, Ehud Barak. They thought they had a deal worked out. It fell apart at the last minute. Well, finally, by 2003, the international community had decided that Israel and the Palestinians would never reach an agreement. So they put together what they thought was a roadmap for peace, and they insisted that the whole world, and that Israel and the Palestinians in particular, comply to it. The quartet was made up of the Soviet Union, the United States of America. It was made up of the UN and the European Union. The big powers of the world said this is what you should do, but Israel didn't do it, and neither had the Palestinians. In 2008, Ehud Olmert, the Prime Minister of Israel at the time, worked out a deal with Mahmoud Abbas. However, Mahmoud Abbas was supposed to get back to him the next day, never did. Then in 2011, the UN Security Council denied Palestinian membership into the United Nations. But in 2012, the UN General Assembly, where America had no veto power, voted to recognize Palestine as a non-member state. 2013, 2014, for 9 months, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry tried with all of his might to negotiate a peace deal. However, it fell apart. Now, I want to back up to a very significant event that happened. In 2009, President Obama made a speech endorsing the 1967 borders. Here's what he said, verbatim. "We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps so that secure and recognized borders are established for both sides." UN Resolution 242 said borders should be negotiated and that 1967 borders were not defensible. Some people even call them suicide borders. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu was very upset when President Obama endorsed the 1967 borders. Already, the relationship between Obama and Netanyahu was poisoned. Then finally in 2015, because Israel would not do everything that President Obama wanted them to do, the White House threatened to withhold its veto at the UN and allow the UN to pass a resolution against Israel. As a matter of fact, I have a quote for you. The White House on Wednesday suggested it could reverse its decades-old policy of using its veto in the United Nations Security Council to protect Israel. It could refuse to veto resolutions related to the Palestinians or introduce a measure of its own. That was the Wall Street Journal on March the 19th of 2005. So now President Obama is threatening to put a resolution into the Security Council, or at least to withhold the U.S. veto from stopping a resolution. And let's see what happened. Well, after 8 years of rancor between President Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Barack Obama finally got his revenge. Once the election was settled, Obama did what he had been itching to do. I'm talking about the 2016 election won by Donald Trump. Once that was settled, Obama did what he had been itching to do throughout his presidency. On December the 23rd, 2016, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 2334, and Obama didn't vote no, thus allowing it to pass. So what does Resolution 2334, remember our subject today? Remember, first step to Armageddon, December 23rd, 2016. That's the day Resolution 233 was adopted. Here's what it said. It reaffirms that the establishment by Israel of settlements in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, watch this, including East Jerusalem, has no legal validity and constitutes, listen, a flagrant violation under international law and a major obstacle to the achievement of the two-state solution and a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace. Now then, Israel's presence in Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, violates international law. Item number 1 of UN Security Council Resolution 2334, passed on December the 23rd, 2016, clearly states that Israel's presence in East Jerusalem is illegal and is a flagrant violation of international law. The UN will invade Jerusalem. It's prophesied by Zechariah in chapter 14, verse 2 through 3. It foretells the invasion of Jerusalem by international forces to enforce Resolution 2334. Here's what it says. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, the United Nations forces, which come down against Israel at Armageddon. The UN invasion of Israel will trigger the second coming of Jesus Christ, and that UN invasion by the United Nations of Jerusalem will be the Battle of Armageddon. The prophecy of Revelation chapter 16, verse 16, identifies this invasion of Jerusalem by all nations as the Battle of Armageddon. Listen to it. And he gathered them together into a place called, in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon. Make no mistake, the world took its first fateful step toward the Battle of Armageddon on December 23rd, 2016. Don't forget, our Armageddon collection, available now for the first time. If you're interested, give us a call. The number to call is 1-800-ENDTIME, 1-800-363-8463, or go to endtime.com.
From Here to Armageddon, a new exciting 8-lesson series to share with your friends and family. Order yours right away.
Answering many questions like, how far are we from the Battle of Armageddon? What will happen between now and then? Where are we on the timeline? Your questions answered in this exciting 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon.
Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-ENDTIME, 1-800-363-8463. Order yours right away.
Most people have dreamed of someday walking on the ground where Jesus walked over 2,000 years ago. You don't want to wait any longer. Make this the year for your life-changing experience. Judy and I would like to invite you to join us for our 2017 Spring End Time Prophecy Tour. This is a 14-day trip to Israel and Rome. Please join us to experience the greatest place on earth, the Promised Land, with an added bonus, Rome, Italy. Start making your plans right now and join us April 30th through May 13th of 2017. We're going to have a wonderful time.
Call now to reserve your place today at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or go to endtime.com.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the Watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the Archives button.
We will be taking your calls in this segment of the program. I'd like for our engineers to go ahead and start bringing our callers up. If you'd like to be on the air with me, the number to call is 877-END-TIME. That's 877-363-8463. I'm sure many of you heard the announcement of our brand new special collection called the Armageddon Collection. In case you didn't catch it all, let me repeat it for you. This consists of several items. Number one, our DVD, Seeds to Armageddon, November the 29th, 2012. Number 2, our 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon. And we're including something that's been asked for so many times that we've not yet made available, but many people saw the timeline in our From Here to Armageddon series, and they wanted a printout. So now when you order the Armageddon collection, you're going to get this printout along with the entire 8-lesson series. Additionally, the DVD, yet to be produced, much more extensive than the program you just heard, will be First Step to Armageddon, December 23rd, 2016. That will be included. And then finally, a copy of the first half of today's program. You will get that DVD, all of that together for a gift of $140 or more, plus it will be some shipping and handling that will be taken care of as well. So in order for you to order, the number to call to order is 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or you can go to endtime.com and you can order there as well. Well, a lot has happened since I talked to you last. Let's pause for some great news. Starting December the 1st, I ask all of you wonderful listeners and partners to help Endtime Ministries with a media bill in arrears in the amount of $470,700. I am so happy to come to you on this first day of February, 2 months later, to tell you you did it. You met the appeal. That is not now all resolved. That doesn't mean we don't have ongoing bills. Of course we do. They never stop here. Every month there are new media bills. There's payroll to meet. There are all the expenses that we have, of course. And that's the reason that monthly faithful partners are so important to us. If you gave during this special drive, but you're not a monthly partner, think about becoming one. It would be so helpful to us because by God's help, we're not going to allow ourselves to accumulate any big balance again. We're going to try to keep this every single month current so that we don't have this problem again. But I just want to stop to say, all of you, do you realize that's almost $500,000 in 2 months that you gave over and above our operating expenses here? Listen, folks, all I can do is say thank you. And I thank you in behalf of Jesus Christ, because this is not my ministry. And I'm not on the air to become famous. I'm on the air to spread the message that we are very, very near now to the second coming of Jesus Christ. But I just had to stop because this is not a small achievement. This is huge. So we want to thank God, first of all, that helped us make this possible. But we also want to thank each of you that contributed. So important. And if I look like I'm sitting a little bit taller today than normal, it's because I am. I have that weight off my shoulders. So thank you so very, very much. I sincerely appreciate it. Okay, we are taking your calls. Just before we come to the phones, though, I want to remind you that there has been a new Supreme Court judge nominated last evening, Judge Neil Gorsuch. And of course, there's a big battle to try to stop him from being confirmed. I see no way that effort is going to succeed. Also, slowly but surely, many of Donald Trump's appointees to his cabinet, they are being confirmed as well. So we're watching, of course, this clash is like I've never seen in politics before. No matter what President Trump does, the Democrats come against it. They don't care whether it's a good decision, a bad decision. They try to pick it apart. But President Trump seems to be just putting his head down and going forward to build his government so that he can fulfill his promises. And it's really interesting to watch this man who is just clicking off his promises that he made during the campaign, one after another. I mean, we're sort of used to politicians making promises during the campaign, and then all of a sudden they're elected, and you don't hear about the promises anymore. They sort of go away. Well, not this time. It's like there's a list, and they're checking it off one after another, which I think is highly commendable because he made promises, we elected him on the strength of his promises, and he's going right down the list to make good. Now, I'm not telling you whether President Trump will be a great president or maybe he'll end up being an awful president. We certainly hope not. But I can't tell you that right now. All I'm saying is, so far, he is checking off the promises that he made and keeping his promises to the American people. The appointment of Judge Neil Gorsuch is one of those promises. He made a list of 21 judges out of which he would pick the first U.S. Supreme Court nomination, and he did. Neil Gorsuch was on that list, and now then he awaits confirmation by the U.S. Senate. They're going to move heaven and earth. The Democratic side is going to move heaven and earth to stop it. Nevertheless, the consensus feeling is that he is so clean from controversy that he will be, in fact, confirmed before the U.S. Senate. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. The one thing I'm thinking as I'm watching President Trump function, I'm remembering the days back when Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union. I think it was 1985 or 86. It was like a whirlwind hit the world. And I mean, he was just, by the time he would do one thing and all of his enemies would gather around to attack it, he was 3 blocks down the road doing something else. And it's like they didn't know where everything was coming from. That's what the presidency so far of Donald Trump is reminding me of. So it's very interesting as we watch it. We're going to go ahead and get to the phones now. Susie's calling from North Carolina. Hello, Susie.
Hey, Pastor. I just wanted to know if you could explain a little bit to me about what is going on in the West Bank today that happened this morning.
Yes, I sure can. Amona is an area in one of the settlements. And this particular section is, I think there's like 500 people who live there. They've been there about 20 years. However, apparently some Palestinians began to dig in some records, and the land on which these homes were built had been given to the Palestinians, this particular Palestinian family, by the Jordanian government way back before 1967. So now they show up with this document and claim that that is their land. The appeal went all the way to the Israeli Supreme Court. The Supreme Court looked at it and said, well, yes, you do have a legal document, and therefore we're going to force the Israelis to move. Well, the Israelis didn't want to move. They even doubted the veracity of the documentation, but the Supreme Court ruled that they had to move, and so consequently, the time has come. Today was the deadline, and they're moving those 500 people out. Now, the government of Israel has promised them that they will build them homes on the other side of the mountain, which will still be a part of that particular settlement, but on undisputed land. And but the Israeli government has not followed through on their promise yet. So that's what's going on here right now. It's reminding us of the moving of 9,000 people out of Gaza back in 2005 by Ariel Sharon. They picked them up kicking and screaming as they hauled them away. And they tried to tell Ariel Sharon, this is not going to bring us peace, it's going to bring us grief. And sure enough, you would have thought the Palestinians would have said, oh, look what a nice gesture the Israeli government is making by pulling out, because some of them had lived there for 40, 50, 60 years. But Ariel Sharon thought, well, this land's going to go when we get a peace deal anyway. I'm going to go ahead and pull them out. Well, instead of appreciating it, immediately the Palestinians moved into that area and started firing rockets at Israel from that territory. Well, again, this is what the people in Israel fear if they should obtain a peace agreement, giving the West Bank to the Palestinians. They fear it's going to just be another Gaza, only this time it'll be 2 miles from Jerusalem. It'll be 1.5 miles from their international airport, the David Ben Gurion Airport. So consequently, that's what all this strife and negotiation is really all about. But anyway, that's what's happening there, Susie.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. And let me add one thing to it. There is a law that has now been submitted to the Israeli Knesset. And this law would provide for, if this kind of a situation would come up again, where they build on a place, been there a long time, nobody had made a claim, and all of a sudden someone shows up to make a claim, that if the claim is in the end ruled valid, that the government could then pay the appraised value of the land at the time of the possession of that land by Palestinians, and then add 25% to it, and thus satisfy the former owners, and then the ownership would illegally switch over to whoever was living there at the time. Now, the Palestinians are frightened to death of this law, and Israel sat on it because they knew that if they passed this law, that it would make things worse with President Obama. However, sitting on it didn't make things any better. President Obama ended up double-crossing Israel anyway and stabbing them in the back by not vetoing the resolution that now has put Israel in direct confrontation and disobedience to international law, the resolution that was passed on December the 23rd of 2016. So all this argument's going on, but now then, Benjamin Netanyahu believes that Donald Trump will defend Israel instead of undermining Israel like President Obama did. And consequently, he is now going straight ahead, and they have resubmitted this bill. I can't think of the name of the bill off the top of my head, but it looks like it could be voted on within the next week or two. However, they may wait until Benjamin Netanyahu visits Donald Trump in the White House on the 15th of this month. The date for his visit has now been scheduled. By the way, I think it's tomorrow that King Abdullah II of Jordan is going to be with President Trump at the White House. So right now he's negotiating, and all of you know that we've been teaching for some time on this program that both Jordan and Israel are the two best friends we have in the Middle East. So it does not surprise me that Jordan is coming here tomorrow, and then 2 weeks from now, Benjamin Netanyahu will ultimately be here as well. King Abdullah of Jordan is in quite a pressurized situation. 70% of his constituency in Jordan is Palestinian, and yet he himself is not Palestinian. However, he's such a skillful leader and so well loved that he's able to keep the Palestinians calmed down so that he can run the country. He very quietly conducts friendship with Israel. As a matter of fact, Jordanian Air Force and Israel's Air Force last year came to America and trained together with the United States. I'm talking about Jordan, Israel, and the United States. Their air pilots trained together at that time, and they're cooperating on many other fronts. But Abdullah tries to keep this down because it would cause him a lot of domestic trouble in his kingdom, but that is in fact where his heart is. We're going to continue to take your calls in the last segment of our program today. The number to call is 877-END-TIME to be on the air with me. To reach our operators, 1-800-END-TIME. You're listening to End of the Age, and we've been talking today about First Step to Armageddon. And that all happened on December 23rd, 2016.
If ever people need to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will really impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctors' offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine did in my life. Call 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME and get your subscription today.
Don't tell anybody, but Friday we're going to be launching a big new project here at Endtime Ministries. What is it? Well, tune in Friday. I'll tell you all about it. But it's going to be important and it's going to be exciting. Once again, we do have open lines today, by the way. The number to call to be on the air with me, 877-END-TIME. And while you're dialing, during some of my research over the last day or two, I stumbled across an article that I had read way back, but I had forgotten about it. This article was actually written in September of 2016, and it's commenting about President Obama's speech at the United Nations. Each year, the General Assembly meets in September at the United Nations, and each head of state has the privilege of going before the world community and speaking so that they can be heard by representatives from all over the world. Well, the President of the United States normally is one of the first to speak because the United Nations is located on our soil. Consequently, President Obama spoke on September the 20th of 2016. And his message was that we all must submit to world government. Let me read a few items out of his speech for you. President Obama said that nations will have to give up some of their autonomy and freedom to achieve security. On Tuesday, during his speech to the United Nations General Assembly, Obama told the audience that he believes global security can be achieved with the help of international institutions like the UN. In his remarks, Obama said powerful nations like the United States will have to accept constraints and give up some of their freedom. In other words, you got to turn it over to the United Nations so it can begin to assume its role as a one world government. He went on to say the president acknowledged that he has been criticized by his own citizens for this belief. I'm one of those citizens. But that he remains convinced he is right. Obama also stated that while countries will have to accept some limits on their freedom, they should not give up the right to defend themselves. We can only realize the promise of this institution's founding, speaking of the United Nations, to replace the ravages of war with cooperation if powerful nations like my own accept constraints. Obama said, I'm convinced in the long run, giving up some freedom of action, not giving up our ability to protect ourselves or pursue our core interests, but binding ourselves to international rules. Did you hear that? Binding ourselves to international rules over the long term enhances our security. Now, he's not the only one that said that. There's an organization here in America that's called the World Federalists, and they've been working since the founding of the United Nations in 1945 to bring about a one world government. If you want to get your eyes open, go to their website, the World Federalists. They are avid advocates of melting the United States into a one world government. They want a world Congress. They want a world court system. They want a world president. They want another layer of government above all the governments of all the nations. So all of us would then become member states of the United States of the world. And ultimately, we would have one leader. Now, that's what this speech is all about, believe it or not. This did not get nearly enough press. But if you wonder what the letting down of our boundaries and all of the entangling alliances, the signing of NAFTA, the signing of TPP, the signing of the World Trade Organization, and all the rest, if you wonder what that's all about, President Obama revealed it in this speech. He believes the answer to the problems of the world is one world government. Now, he's not the only one. It was shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall on November the 9th of 1989 that our president at the time, President George Herbert Walker Bush, made a speech, and he stated that he believed we were within striking distance of the establishment of a new world order when the United Nations would live up to the dream that many people had for it when it was formed in 1945. Many people believed we should go into world government in 1945. However, the people that did not want to surrender U.S. sovereignty blocked it. Well, now then, in 1991, George Herbert Walker Bush made this speech saying we have a real chance at this big idea called a new world order. When you hear new world order, what they're really talking about is one world government. So they're working towards it very zealously, very feverishly. All of these activities come together because in the first part of our broadcast today, we talked about the world government telling Israel they cannot have Jerusalem as their capital. And all the nations are obeying. 193 nations that are members of the UN. Guess how many of them have their embassies in Israel's capital, Jerusalem? 0. Guess how many nations of this world the UN recognizes their chosen capital? 192 out of 193. Jerusalem is the only capital that is not recognized by the United Nations. And a lot of people can explain that away in so many ways, but the bottom line is the world government says that Israel must surrender at least East Jerusalem to the Palestinians, and that Israel cannot have its capital there. Now, what's the real reason behind this? Well, let me tell you, it's no mystery. Remember I read earlier in the program that Almighty God said, I will put my name in Jerusalem forever? And Satan said, really? Well, if you want your name in Jerusalem, guess where I want mine? The city over which more wars have been fought than any other city on the planet? You guessed it, Jerusalem. Why? Why so many wars over Jerusalem? I mean, it's not that advantageous militarily. It's not an economic center of the world. And yet for some reason, more wars, somewhere between 40 and 44 wars have been fought over Jerusalem since its founding by David back in 1000 BC. Why so many? Because God said, I'll put my name there. And Satan said, if that's where you want your name, that's exactly where I want mine. And you know, there's one more war coming that will be fought over Jerusalem. Zechariah 14:2 says, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. That's the reason we named this program today, First Step to Armageddon, December 23rd, 2016, because it was on that day that the world government passed a resolution with the agreement of the United States of America. Well, not really. With the agreement of the Obama administration. The reason I say not really is because Congress voted a couple of weeks later, and the vote was something like 320 to 65, disapproving what President Obama had done and also what John Kerry had done. So it was not really representing America. It was simply representing President Barack Obama. And consequently, when we allowed that resolution to pass, and we could have stopped it, all we had to do, raise our hand and vote no. That's all we had to do. It would have stopped it. But now that it's enshrined in international law that Israel must withdraw from the West Bank and withdraw from East Jerusalem. Well, Israel's not going to withdraw from East Jerusalem. They shouldn't withdraw from any of it. But because of international pressure, they're going to negotiate a deal that will allow the Palestinians to have their homeland out in the West Bank, the area called Judea Samaria. You realize that Judea means home of the Jews? That's where the Palestinians are going to establish their new state very quickly now, in the home of the Jews. And the Jewish people are going to yield to the pressure, the international pressure of the international community. And the Jewish people are going to allow the establishment of a Palestinian state, hoping to buy peace. But there won't be any peace. Because 7 years after they signed that agreement, they're going to find themselves invaded, not by the Palestinians, but by the world government forces of the United Nations, which will be much stronger then than they are right now. Your Bible specifically says it. I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. When the world government armies invade Israel, Israel is going to fight for Jerusalem. Remember what David said. If I fail to esteem Jerusalem above my chief joy, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. David made his living writing psalms, singing, and let my right hand forget her cunning. He was also a famous warrior. So he was a swordsman, he was a harp player, he was a singer. So he said, let me lose my most cherished faculties if I fail to esteem Jerusalem above my chief joy. Consequently, there is going to be invasion by the United Nations against Jerusalem 7 years after the peace agreement is signed. And they're working on the peace agreement right now. Cannot tell you how long between now and the time they sign it, but they're working on it right now. All this is coming down the pike right now. But Israel is not going to compromise on that one issue. Israel is going to stand firm. I went to the Israeli Knesset a few years back because I had heard that a document called the Jerusalem Covenant was on the main floor of the Knesset, and I found it encased in glass. It had the signatures of Yitzhak Rabin, of most of the other leaders, and what it said was, we will never allow Jerusalem to be divided. It actually was written in 1993 when the United States was putting such pressure, and the world was putting such pressure on Israel to withdraw from land. They entered into a covenant. It's called the Jerusalem Covenant. I have a copy of it in my office. They entered into a covenant that they would never allow the division of Jerusalem. And they're not going to. But the Antichrist and his one world government is going to invade to try to force them to do it. And when they lose half the city and it looks like they're going down, that's when Jesus Christ is going to come and defend them. Okay, just before we go off the air, we have a brand new exciting product to offer to you today. Let me tell you about it. It's called the Armageddon Collection. So what does the term Armageddon mean? Why is it so important in Bible prophecy in the last days? And what will happen between now and then? In our new Armageddon Collection, we cover subjects such as events of the final 7 years, the reveal of the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, and the world's greatest revival just ahead. In this special offer, you will receive the DVD, Seeds to Armageddon, November 29, 2012. That's another important date. We tell you all about that in that DVD. Our 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon, along with a printout of our 7-year timeline. Everybody's asking for a copy of it. Our brand new DVD, First Step to Armageddon, December 23, 2016, much more extensive than what you've heard today. Plus a free DVD of today's broadcast, all for $140, plus shipping and handling. If you're interested, give us a call. The number to call, 1-800-ENDTIME, or go to endtime.com. That's 1-800-363-8463. Why don't you do it right now?
End of the Age is a production of Endtime Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.